All right, welcome back to the Elias Makos Show, and welcome to hopefully our first of a couple of mini debates that we're going to do on various campaign issues. Now, we all know federal election. We've got the two big debates happening this week, Wednesday and Thursday night. The French debate on Wednesday up against the Canadiens game, I should add, and then the English debate on Thursday. Ahead of that, we wanted to take some time on this program to speak to candidates from the Montreal area about the subjects that matter to you. And listen, we were just having a discussion with our listeners. The subject was crime at our last caller. I believe his name was Chris. What did he say? You know what the issue is for him? It's not crime. It's paying for groceries. It's the economy. So I'm happy that today we're going to spend some time to focus on the economy. Now, let me tell you about the backstory here, because we invited the four main parties in Quebec. We invited those parties to join us here in the debate. Obviously, we've got space considerations. We're going to be in studio here. So we figured that 4 was the maximum, especially when it comes to time. The 4 was the number of people we could invite. So with that in mind, we invited the Liberals and the Conservatives and the NDP and the Bloc to join us in studio today. Now, I should point this out. 3 parties pretty much accepted right away. The NDP, the Bloc, and the Liberals pretty much all accepted right away. We got radio silence at one point. Like the phone lines just dropped from the Conservatives. They stopped responding. So they are not here today. And then I should also point this out, that I'm looking at the TV set, who was going to be here for the Liberals. We were told Carlos Leitao, well, he's running in the Laval area, and he will be in studio. It's done. And then this morning, we get a note from the Liberals saying, oh, he's not going to be able to make it. So that was a last-minute cancellation from the Liberal Party. But no matter. I think the issues here are still too important, and we can have a good discussion about the issues and why we're seeing certain things in this country right now, and especially when it comes to the economy. So it's my pleasure. We're down to 2, but I think we're still going to have a really substantial discussion. Our pleasure to welcome into studio 2 Sauvés. I should point this out. Craig Sauvé is with us. He's the NDP nominee in LaSalle-Émard-Verdun. Craig, good to see you again.
Good to see you, Elias.
And Louis-Philippe Sauvé is the Bloc Quebecois candidate in LaSalle-Émard-Verdun. Louis-Philippe, great to see you again.
Great to see you again.
And I should point this out. It is nice that the 2 that have shown up today are people that have been on this show previously. So guys, welcome. Thanks for coming. Let's have a discussion about the economy. I want to throw something at you to talk about the economy. I think we got to understand why we're in the state we're in. So I'll throw this at the both of you. I'll start with you, Craig, since you're closest to me, okay? Now, the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, has said that over the last 10 years, Canada's per capita GDP grew virtually 0%, a big giant egg, okay? While south of the border, America, same time, last 10 years, their GDP per capita grew 22%. I want to know, why do you think that is? Why have we seen economic stagnation in Canada over the last decade?
I feel, Elias, we've really dropped the ball on some of the major economic development we can do, some of the long-term thinking that we can do to make sure that, we can develop new science and technology here, that we can develop new companies that are going to do things that are going to change the world. And, back in the day, we used to invest a lot directly into science and technology. We have, obviously, the National Research Council and some of the studies that have produced actual, like BlackBerry, for example, the cryptography that made BlackBerry so popular was direct basic science investment that Canada did. So where has Canada been on these really important, I think, science and technology leads? That's pretty amazing. And the second thing is, we have such talent in this city, right? We're talking our universities that are being, underfunded and underloved by the provincial government. They're going to need some more support too. That's where we can develop this science and technology to put Canada back on the map as a leader. And, we're seeing an income inequality also in Canada, right? So the rich are getting drastically richer and the middle class is disappearing, and low-income Canadians are suffering right now. People are finding a hard time. So when all the wealth is sort of accumulated and hoarded by a small percent, it stays often in bank accounts and investment funds, and it doesn't circulate in the economy to develop small businesses and small innovative, types of entrepreneurships.
Louis-Philippe, I want to know your thoughts on the economic stagnation. If you look, and I'm looking at one metric, GDP per capita, but it's a 0% in a decade. And much of that is true for Quebec. And I know the Bloc Quebecois obviously wants to represent Quebec interests. What is your take on that?
Well, first thing first, the Canadian economy has been experiencing productivity problems for a decade. I think we have invested too much in bureaucracy and not enough in the private sector and good market solution. And it's a pity that the Liberals are not there to answer their thoughts on that, because in the last 10 years, precisely the last 10 years that we've experienced this productivity crisis, they were in power. So I don't know.
Can I ask you, Craig, the word productivity, sometimes it comes up and it's used, when you bring up productivity, you're blaming Canadian workers, right? For the lack of growth. But I want your take, maybe the NDP's take on productivity, because it is true what Louis-Philippe brought up. Canada is falling behind on that another level, another metric, productivity. How do you view it?
Productivity can also be processes as well, Indeed, like the NDP is a party that's always going to stand up for workers, for sure. We want to make sure that everybody has a job, and the job is good quality, and they could put food on the table and give people a solid housing situation in their homes. But there's also, a lot of businesses that could use some investments right now in terms of their, if they're actually performing, if they're building things, if they're factories, and when the dollar is strong, there's opportunities there. But there's going to need to be, I think, tax credits and help to small businesses and middle-sized businesses to do those investments in order to gain that productivity. And so these are some of the issues I know that businesses are facing. The NDP has always been solid on these. For the SR&ED tax incentives back in the day, we were fighting super hard to make sure they were maintained when Stephen Harper was really going in the wrong direction in terms of productivity.
Can I ask you, do you have a solution on the productivity front? You brought it up, the productivity is an issue. Does the Bloc have a solution?
Well, I think that I'm just going to give you an example, the aerospace industry. So the aerospace industry in Montreal is really important. It's good paying jobs that trickle down in the economy. So our economic hike is based is driven by the private sector. So there's only the Bloc Quebecois that stands for aerospace strategy for the industry here in Montreal, and so this is only one issue. But when I think of the trade war ongoing with the United States, I think it's going to be important to support our workers and our businesses to face things. For example, to bringing back the wage subsidy so that businesses can face the music.
I'm going to bring up the elephant in the room, which is the United States, in a moment. But before we get there, I do want to ask the both of you about the deficit, okay? We have a very large deficit in the country, $60 billion plus. And I'm wondering how you rein that in without touching social programs. And every party makes big campaign promises. They cost money. So, Craig, I'll start with you. We're with Craig Sauvé and Louis-Philippe Sauvé. Craig's running for the NDP. Louis-Philippe is running for the Bloc Quebecois. Craig, I'll start with you here. What is your party's plan to get the books in order?
I will say one thing, too. When Mr. Carney talks about a zero deficit in 3 years, I agree with you. There's no way you can do it without cutting social programs. That's what Paul Martin did in the 1990s. Mr. Carney was very pleased to, brag about his work with Paul Martin, but it was devastating for transfers for health, for education, for social programs, cracks that were put in the system that we haven't repaired to this day. So this kind of austerity politics is not something the NDP represents. In terms of actually using the money we have better, there we have some solutions. For example, just last year, and it's Environmental Defence Canada that came up with a study just last week that shows that our subsidies to the oil and gas industries in Canada, $30 billion last year alone. $30 billion. So, I mean, our party is calling for an end to all subsidies for big oil and big gas. We got to help out, families, seniors, students. They're little guy right now. So we would maintain our financing of social programs, in fact, increase them, and that's where we would get the money.
But is your solution something that long term, like how long can we run large deficits? At a certain point, you have to pay it. And you have to think about future generations. So
Absolutely.
I would just wonder if what you're proposing actually is a long-term solution.
I would remind, Tommy Douglas, famous NDP leader, when he was CCF premier, he was able to run year after year, zero deficit budgets, and he created the first Medicare program in Canada. He gave electricity to people in Saskatchewan. There's a way to spend money smartly. And what we're saying is, if we want to reduce the amount of deficit, we have to be smart with the money. We have to tax the people who are hoarding the wealth. Those are the ultra rich, and there is a lot, and they're getting richer faster, and spread that money around to the middle class and low income class.
Louis-Philippe, your party will be in a position, perhaps, to support a minority government that may have various positions on dealing with the deficit and the budget. How will your party influence the debate in Ottawa when it comes to reining in spending and avoiding massive deficits?
Well, when it comes to deficit, we should not only take a look at the expense, but also the revenue. And both the Liberal and the Conservative, they promises to lower taxes, but at the very same time, they propose to go to the 2% of the GDP in public spending for defense. So we should look at the expense, but also the income, and we should not cut ourselves from incomes that are very important, not only for the government recipes, but also for the environment. The Liberal government cut the carbon tax. In Quebec, we're not impacted by these cuts, but the government cuts itself from revenues that could improve our environment and our carbon balance sheet.
Welcome back to the Elias Makos Show. We're continuing our economic mini debate here on this show. Ahead of the main federal election debates on Wednesday and Thursday, we've invited local Montreal area candidates to come talk about economic issues. Now, I told the whole spiel here about what happened here, but two have shown up today. Craig Sauvé, NDP nominee in LaSalle-Émard-Verdun, and Louis-Philippe Sauvé, also running in that riding for the Bloc Quebecois. The Liberals and the Conservatives, one way or the other, or another, declined our invitation at the end of the day. Guys, I want to talk about the elephant in the room, and we've touched on it before, because when we talk economy, the United States is going to come up. So I want to talk about the United States and tariffs and our trading partners. Now, a Quebec business in Saint-Jean-sur-Richelieu, just south of Montreal, right? They're 40 minutes, a 40-minute drive from the U.S. border, okay? 40 minutes. And there's been a broad talk that what we need to do now, in light of Donald Trump and tariffs, we need to diversify our trading partners. Look to Europe. Look to Asia. Europe is 6,000 kilometers away, a boat and a plane ride involved. Asia, 14,000 kilometers away, a boat or a plane ride involved. Again, for that business in Saint-Jean-sur-Richelieu, a 40-minute drive to the U.S. My question to you, and I'll start with you, Louis-Philippe, shouldn't we instead be doubling down, instead of going away from the U.S., should we not try to find ways to double down on trade with the largest market in the world that's 40 minutes south of Saint-Jean-sur-Richelieu? What do you say?
Well, I think we all wish that, but the thing is that there's a man in the White House that doesn't want that. He wants to separate our both economies. We ain't got no choice. So I think we should take a look on Europe and try to diversify towards Europe. But for sure, it's going to be hard because geography is more important and really relevant to export and import. So it's going to be a difficult trade war, but I think it's going to be harder for the Americans because both of our economies are really integrated. So Mr. Trump is basically applying the art of the deal playbook. He wants to intimidate us. He wants us to freak out, and we should not be impressed. We should take our time because the midterms are closer to him than the next general election. So we should keep calm.
So with that in mind, right, because you mentioned there's midterms coming up. I think Louis-Philippe's point is very valid. There's the fact that broad swaths of the United States are clearly on Team Canada. You hear it from quote-unquote blue states. So again, more reasons for me to say, let's stick with the U.S., let's make the case to the U.S. What do you say on this, Craig? Because it certainly has been used as a boogeyman in this campaign. Oh, the United States is not our friend anymore. And I think it's influenced how people feel about this election. What do you say?
Well, Donald Trump is not reliable, right? Like, we have deals with the U.S. and he just tears them up. And he goes one way one day, and the next day seems to change his mind. So we're kind of stuck dealing with this guy. And in the interim, what we're saying at the NDP is we've got to rebuild Canada's self-reliance. How do we do that? Well, we did it just after the Second World War. We did a major construction plan for housing, which we need housing. You know that. We want to build, the NDP, 100,000 nonprofit housing units in 5 years. We can do that just by canceling the oil and gas subsidy that I mentioned before. That's plenty of money to do it. We want to invest in local roads, infrastructure, bridges, public transit, things that we need, that are good for Canadians, good for our local economy, that will create jobs, use our local materials, because unfortunately we can't rely on the States for now. Like I think we all hope we can return to a time when we're engaging in friendly trade talks with the United States. But since we can't rely on them, we've got to look straight into our own country and say, we've got to make these investments now. And after the Second World War, I'll just say this, the Canadian government financed massive projects and it drove growth in Canada for decades to come. It was so good for our economy. It gave what we gave today.
You're talking about what we can do here. So let me ask the both of you this pretty direct question. Should we have total free trade within Canada? 10 provinces, 3 territories. Louis-Philippe, what do you say?
Well, I think it's a false debate because since 1867, 67, I'm sorry, Canada has been union douanière, a monetary union. Yeah. So there's not that much trade barriers between provinces. Of course, one cannot bring alcohol back from New Brunswick or Ontario, but that's not a game changer when it comes to the big picture of the economy. And the trade barrier that are that are in there, we don't want to be abolished. For instance, things that force forest industry to transform natural resources in the province of Quebec, or linguistic barriers, so to say, for physicians or professionals. So I think it's not really a real question here.
I've heard, though, a lot of, whether it's premiers or others, making the case that no, we have too many barriers. Does the NDP have a position on free trade within this country, Craig?
To reduce the trade barriers, what we're proposing is harmonizing upwards. In other words, the trade barriers are often like standards, right? Like, I'll give you an example. We remember the terrible, tragic hockey team in Humboldt that was killed. A trucker hit a bus. It was devastating for the entire country. Well, what happened in the province thereafter? They decided to increase the amount of weeks that truckers need to take training. But not all provinces have the same amount of training, so that's a trade barrier. But do we want to reduce the amount of training for truckers or raise the amount of training? So we're saying let's raise and harmonize upwards to make worker safety more improved, to make environmental standards more improved. And, that's the way we can actually do it, but actually helping our country develop civilizationally.
I want to squeeze in one more question to you, and it has to do with the green economic transition. How big of a role should the government play in this green energy transition? We've seen massive investments by government in green energy projects. Often they don't pan out. What would be your party's approach to this economic transition? Craig, I'll have you start on this one. I'll give each of you 1 minute.
Well, fossil fuels are not the energy of the future. Like, if we want to be smart economically, we have to invest where society and where the economy is going. And that means renewable energy. That means wind energy and solar energy. Some of the biggest producers of solar energy in North America, Texas is one of the biggest places, right?
Yep.
So this is just good for the economy if we diversify our economy in a way that society is going anyway. It'll create jobs and it will be long lasting. So that's where the NDP wants to go. And indeed, we believe that government financing is a driver. Again, we've seen it in the past where government financing has created growth for Canada for decades to come. We want to harness that same energy we found after the Second World War to reduce poverty globally.
Louis-Philippe, you'll get the last word here.
Well, we spoke about diversifying our exchanges, and as of January 1st, 2026, the European Union will have trade barriers for countries that don't support green energies. So if we want to emancipate ourselves from the United States, we should start investing in green energies and stop scrapping taxes such as carbon tax. Because if we don't do that, we'll be too much reliable on the United States States. And as Craig said previously, the United States are no longer a reliable trade partner, and we hope it's changed in the future.
Gentlemen, I want to thank you both for coming in this morning. Do appreciate it. The voices you heard right there, Louis-Philippe Sauvé is the Bloc Quebecois candidate in LaSalle-Émard-Verdun, and Craig Sauvé is the NDP candidate, coincidentally also in LaSalle-Émard-Verdun. For our listeners just tuning in, we did invite the Liberals and Conservatives. They declined the invitation at the end of the day. Thank you, gentlemen, so much for coming in
Thanks,
today.
Elias.
Thank you.